Ambassador Zeftai had seen many species across the galaxy during his 300 years of diplomatic service. The tall, blue-skinned Altarian had negotiated peace treaties between the crystal beings of Nexus Prime and the gas-dwelling Vorthan Empire. He had watched the proud Kethmori bow their heads and surrender after their homeworld was consumed by their own civil wars. He had seen empires rise and fall like waves on an endless shore. But he had never seen anything quite like the humans. The first time he encountered them was at the Galactic Council's emergency session on Station Omega-7, a massive diplomatic hub floating in neutral space between the territories of 12 major civilizations. The humans had recently been discovered by a Kethmori exploration vessel, and their application for membership in the Galactic Council had caused quite a stir. Zeftai remembered that day clearly. The humans sent only 3 representatives to speak for their entire species. Most new civilizations sent dozens of diplomats, scientists, and military advisors. The humans sent a middle-aged woman with graying hair who introduced herself simply as Admiral Chen, a younger man with kind eyes called Dr. Martinez, and a woman with fierce green eyes who gave no title but said her name was Sarah. The other council members whispered among themselves as the humans took their seats at the speaking platform. The Kethmori delegation, led by War Chief Thrakenel, were particularly dismissive. Their red-scaled forms towered over most other species, and their reputation for conquest made even the peaceful Altarians nervous. So these are the famous humans, Thrakenel had rumbled, his deep voice carrying across the chamber. The ones who think they can join our council after existing in space for less than 200 of their years. Admiral Chen stood up calmly. She was small compared to most beings in the chamber, barely reaching the chest of an average Kethmori warrior. But when she spoke, her voice carried a quiet strength that made everyone listen. "We don't think we deserve a place here because of how long we've been traveling between stars," she said. "We think we deserve it because of what we can offer. Peace, trade, knowledge, and friendship to those who want it." The chamber erupted in various forms of laughter and dismissive sounds. The Kethmori delegation was particularly amused. Thrakenel stood up, his massive form casting a shadow over the human delegation. "Friendship," he sneered. "What can a species of soft mammals offer the great powers of this galaxy? You have no mighty fleets. Your technology is primitive. Your worlds are few. You are nothing more than children playing among the stars." Zeftai watched as something changed in the human's expressions. It was subtle but unmistakable. Admiral Chen's jaw tightened slightly. Dr. Martinez stopped taking notes and looked directly at the Kethmori war chief. Sarah's green eyes seemed to grow colder. But Admiral Chen's voice remained calm. "We prefer peace, War Chief Thrakenel. But that doesn't mean we're defenseless children. Every species here has the right to exist freely and safely. We simply ask for the same consideration." The Kethmori war chief laughed again. "Rights? Freedom? Safety? These are things the strong give to the weak out of mercy. And mercy must be earned." Zeftai felt a chill run down his spine. As an experienced diplomat, he recognized the signs of a species testing boundaries. The Kethmori were known for their aggressive nature, but they usually didn't make such open threats in council chambers. The Vorthan representative, speaking through their translation device, added their own dismissive comment. "The humans claim to offer knowledge, but what could they possibly know that we don't? We have been studying the stars since before their sun was born." Dr. Martinez finally spoke up. "We know that every problem has a solution, and every challenge can be overcome if you're willing to work hard enough and never give up. We know that the impossible is just something that hasn't been figured out yet." The crystal beings of Nexus Prime chimed in with their harmonic voices, creating a sound like breaking glass. Their translation devices converted their meaning. Naive optimism. The universe is harsh and unforgiving. Reality does not bend to wishful thinking. Sarah spoke the first time. Her voice was quiet, but it carried clearly across the chamber. "No, reality doesn't bend to wishful thinking, but it does bend to those who refuse to accept defeat." Zeftai found himself studying the humans more carefully. There was something in their manner that didn't match their apparent weakness. They faced the combined dismissal of 12 major galactic powers with the same calm they might show at a friendly dinner party. The session continued for several hours, with various council members questioning the humans about their technology, their military capabilities, their economic systems, and their intentions. The humans answered every question honestly, admitting their limitations, but never apologizing for them. As the day wore on, Zeftai began to notice something strange. Despite being outnumbered, outgunned, and outexperienced, the humans never seemed intimidated. They discussed their small fleet of ships the same way the Kethmori discussed their vast armadas. They talked about their developing technology with the same confidence the Vorthans showed when describing their ancient sciences. When the formal session ended, Zeftai approached the human delegation. His diplomatic training had taught him to seek understanding beyond formal presentations. "Admiral Chun," he said, offering the traditional Altarian greeting of respect. "I'm Ambassador Zeftai of the Altarian Republic. I wanted to personally welcome you to the station." Admiral Chun smiled, and Zeftai was struck by how the expression transformed her face from serious to genuinely warm. "Thank you, Ambassador. We appreciate the kindness. If I may ask," Zeftai continued carefully, "your species seems remarkably calm considering the reception you've received today. Many new civilizations find their first council session rather overwhelming." Dr. Martinez chuckled. "Oh, we're definitely overwhelmed. The technology here is amazing, and the diversity of life is incredible. But overwhelming doesn't mean scary. You didn't seem concerned by the war chief's pointed comments," Zeftai observed. Sarah's green eyes met his. "Should we be?" The simple question caught Zeftai off guard. There was no bravado in her voice, no attempt to sound tough. She seemed genuinely curious about whether the threats were something worth worrying about. "The Kethmori are known for their military might," Zeftai explained. "They have conquered 17 different worlds and absorbed dozens of smaller civilizations. Their threats are not usually empty ones." Admiral Chin nodded thoughtfully. "We researched the major powers before coming here. The Kethmori's military record is impressive, but conquest and military strength aren't the same thing." Zeftai tilted his head, a gesture of confusion among his people. "I'm not sure I understand the distinction." "Conquest means you defeated someone," Dr. Martinez explained. "Military strength means you can defeat anyone who challenges you. The Kethmori have definitely proven the first, but they've never really been tested on the second." Before Zeftai could ask what he meant by that, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red, and automated voices began announcing in multiple languages. "All personnel to emergency stations. Unknown vessels approaching." This is not a drill. The humans reacted with swift efficiency that surprised Zeftai. Without discussion or apparent planning, Admiral Chun headed toward the station's command center while Dr. Martinez went to the communication array, and Sarah moved toward the docking bays. They moved like parts of the same organism. Zeftai followed Admiral Chun, his diplomatic status granting him access to the command center. The large chamber was filled with representatives from various species, all staring at the main display screen that showed space around the station. 3 massive ships were approaching fast. Zeftai recognized the design immediately: hegemony warships. The hegemony was a relatively new but extremely aggressive faction that had appeared in the Outer Rim systems 5 years ago. They conquered worlds not for resources or strategic advantage, but apparently for the simple joy of conquest itself. "Hegemony vessels," announced Commander Vextar, the Kethmori officer who ran station security. "They're not responding to communication attempts, and they're on an attack vector." War Chief Thrakanael pushed his way to the front of the command center. "How many ships?" 3 heavy cruisers, Vextar replied, each one capable of destroying this station. "Our defensive capabilities?" Admiral Chun asked quietly. Every head in the command center turned to look at her. Station Omega 7 was supposed to be neutral ground. It had defensive shields, but no weapons. "This is a diplomatic station," Vextar said slowly. "We have no military capabilities." "Then, we need to evacuate," Chin said matter-of-factly. Thrakanael's laugh was harsh. "With what ships?" "Most delegations arrived in small diplomatic vessels. We couldn't evacuate 1/10 of the people on this station before those ships arrive." Zeftai felt his breathing quicken. In his 300 years, he had been in dangerous situations before, but never one so hopeless. The station held over 50,000 beings from dozens of species. The hegemony's reputation for leaving no survivors was well known. How long until they reach us? Admiral Chun asked. 23 minutes, Vextar replied. Chun touched a communication device on her wrist. Martinez, Sarah, emergency status update. How quickly can we be ready to move? Dr. Martinez's voice came through clearly. Our ship can be prepped for departure in 5 minutes. Sarah's voice followed immediately after. Ship is armed and ready. But, Admiral, our vessel can maybe take 30 people total. Zeftai stared at the humans in growing confusion. They were calmly discussing evacuation plans that would save a fraction of 1% of the station's population. Yet they didn't seem panicked or distressed. If anything, they seemed focused. Admiral, Thrakenel rumbled, your noble intentions are appreciated, but 30 lives will not matter when 50,000 die. Admiral Chun turned to look at the war chief, and Zeftai saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. It wasn't fear or desperation. It was calculation. You're right, she said quietly. 30 lives won't matter. But 3 hegemony ships? Those might matter quite a lot. The command center fell completely silent. Every being present stared at the small human woman who had just suggested that her single, small ship could somehow matter against 3 heavy cruisers. Admiral, Commander Vextar said carefully, your vessel is registered as a diplomatic transport. It has no significant weapons or defensive systems. Admiral Chin smiled, and this time the expression was nothing like the warm welcome she had shown Zeftai earlier. This smile was sharp and cold and absolutely confident. Commander, our ship is registered as whatever we needed it to be registered as to get permission to dock here. What our ship actually is, well, that's a different question entirely. She touched her communication device again. Martinez, how long to implement Protocol 7? 15 minutes if we skip the safety checks, came the immediate reply. Skip them. Sarah, combat readiness status. All systems green, Admiral. Ready when you are. Thrakenel's massive form loomed over Admiral Chun. Human, what exactly are you suggesting? That your single ship will engage 3 hegemony cruisers in battle. Admiral Chun looked up at him without flinching. I'm suggesting that we're about to show you the difference between conquest and military strength. The main display updated. The hegemony ships were now 18 minutes away. Their massive forms grew visibly larger on the screen as they approached. Each ship was nearly a kilometer long and bristled with weapon systems that could reduce entire cities to rubble. Zeftai felt a strange mix of terror and fascination. He was about to witness either the most heroic sacrifice in galactic history or the most spectacular example of human delusion ever recorded. Admiral Chun moved to the station's communication array. This is Admiral Chun of the Earth vessel Defiance to approaching hegemony ships. This station is under the protection of the Terran Federation. Turn around now, and no harm will come to you. The response came quickly, transmitted on open frequencies so everyone on the station could hear it. The voice was mechanical, translated through hegemony communication systems. Humans, we have heard of your species. Weak mammals who think themselves important. Today, you will learn the price of standing against the hegemony. Admiral Chin's expression didn't change. Understood. Sarah, you are authorized to engage hostile vessels. Show them why the universe should be more careful about calling us weak mammals. Through the station's observation ports, Zeftai could see a small ship undocking from one of the civilian berths. The vessel was sleek, but unremarkable, perhaps 200 meters long, and appearing to have standard propulsion and basic defensive systems. Against 3 ships, each 5 times its size, and carrying enough firepower to destroy planets, it looked like a child's toy. The hegemony ships opened fire first, sending massive energy beams toward both the station and the human vessel. The station's shields flared and held, but everyone in the command center knew they wouldn't withstand sustained bombardment for long. The human ship, incredibly, dodged. Not just the first volley, but the second and third as well. It moved through space with an agility that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. How was it moving like that? Commander Vextar asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Human engineering, Admiral Chun replied simply. Then, the human ship returned fire. What happened next will be talked about in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. The small vessel unleashed a barrage of weapons fire that no one in the command center had ever seen before. Beams of pure energy, projectiles that seemed to bend space around them, and something that looked like controlled lightning tore through space toward the hegemony vessels. The first cruiser's shields collapsed in seconds. The second cruiser tried to maneuver away, but found itself caught in some kind of energy field that held it in place while the human weapons systematically dismantled its defensive systems. But it was what the human ship did to the third cruiser that made Zeftai understand why Admiral Chun had seemed so calm. Instead of destroying the vessel outright, the human ship somehow disabled its propulsion systems while leaving everything else intact. Then, it pulled alongside the massive warship, a vessel 5 times its size, and attached itself to the hull like a parasite. "What are they doing?" Thrakadel asked, his voice barely a whisper. Admiral Chen's smile grew wider. "They're boarding." The next 20 minutes were unlike anything Zeftai had ever experienced. Through the station's sensors, they could monitor what was happening aboard the hegemony vessel. The human boarding party, which couldn't have been more than a dozen people, moved through the ship like a force of nature. The hegemony were known for their ferocity in combat. Their soldiers were augmented with cybernetic implants and combat drugs that made them nearly unstoppable. A single hegemony warrior could fight a dozen normal soldiers and win. The humans went through them like they weren't even there. Within 15 minutes, the massive cruiser had gone completely dark. No communications, no movement, no signs of life. Then, incredibly, it began moving again, but now under human control. The human ship detached from the cruiser and moved to the second hegemony vessel, which had been drifting helplessly since its systems were disabled. The same process repeated. Boarding, brief conflict, then silence. By the time the engagement ended, the human ship had captured 2 hegemony cruisers intact and completely destroyed the third. The wreckage of the destroyed vessel formed a glittering cloud of debris that would serve as a navigation hazard for years to come. As the human ship returned to dock with the station, the command center remained completely silent. 50,000 beings on the station had just watched 3 humans in a single small ship defeat a force that could have destroyed entire worlds. Admiral Chun touched her communication device. "Sarah, clean sweep." "Well done." "Martinez, damage report." "No significant damage to report, Admiral," came the scientist's cheerful voice. "Though we'll need to recalibrate the primary weapons array." Sarah was having a bit too much fun with the targeting systems. Sarah's voice came through with what sounded like laughter. "Hey, they started it. Besides, it's been months since we had a real fight." Admiral Chun turned to address the stunned command center. "The threat has been eliminated. Normal station operations can resume." War Chief Thrakadel stared at her with an expression Zeftai had never seen on a Kethmori face before, something that looked almost like fear. What are you?" he asked quietly. Admiral Chen's expression returned to the warm, friendly demeanor she had shown during the diplomatic session. "We're humans, War Chief. We're exactly what we told you we were. A species that prefers peace, but isn't defenseless. A people who believe in friendship and cooperation." She paused, and her smile became something sharper. "We're also the species that spent 10,000 years fighting each other before we ever left our home planet. We're the people who turned warfare into an art form long before we learned to travel between stars. We're the civilization that considers 3-to-1 odds to be almost fair." Zeftai felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans had never lied during their diplomatic presentation. They had answered every question honestly, but they had never been asked the right questions. "You said you preferred peace," he managed to say. "We do," Admiral Chen replied. "Peace is much more pleasant than war. But preferring peace doesn't mean being unprepared for war. And being prepared for war doesn't mean being unwilling to fight one." Dr. Martinez's voice came through the communication system again. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different hegemony outposts in this sector. Apparently word of what happened here is spreading quickly. Acknowledge their surrenders and forward the information to the appropriate authorities," Admiral Chen replied. "And Martinez? Send a message to Earth. Tell them the diplomatic mission was a complete success." As the humans prepared to leave the station to return to their ship, Zeftai found himself thinking about everything he had witnessed. The humans had demonstrated military capabilities that exceeded anything in the known galaxy. They had captured 2 enemy vessels intact while completely destroying a third. They had broken a hegemony attack force that could have threatened entire systems. And they had done it all while never losing their pleasant, friendly demeanor. That night, as Zeftai sat in his quarters trying to process what he had seen, he began to understand why the hegemony outposts had surrendered so quickly. It wasn't fear of human weapons or human ships. It was the realization that the humans had been holding back during the entire engagement. They had used just enough force to eliminate the threat, but the ease with which they had done it suggested capabilities far beyond what they had shown. Over the following days, as news of the incident spread throughout the galaxy, HFY watched the political landscape shift. Species that had dismissed the humans during the council session now sought audiences with Admiral Chun. Trading partnerships that had seemed unlikely suddenly became urgent priorities. But it was War Chief Thrakenael's reaction that told HFY the most about what had really happened. The massive Kethmori warrior, who had spent his entire life conquering other species, sought out Admiral Chun before the humans departed the station. "Admiral," he said, his deep voice unusually respectful. "The Kethmori Empire would be honored to establish formal relations with the Terran Federation." Admiral Chun smiled her warm, genuine smile. "We would be delighted to discuss friendship and cooperation with the Kethmori people, War Chief." But HFY noticed that Thrakenael's request hadn't mentioned conquest or absorption or dominance. For the first time in Kethmori history, they were asking for friendship as equals rather than demanding submission as inferiors. As the human delegation prepared to leave Station Omega-7, HFY realized that everything had changed. The galaxy had spent millennia assuming that military power and aggressive expansion were the marks of a strong civilization. The humans had proven that the most dangerous species might be the one that could end any fight, but chose not to start one. The most powerful civilization might be the one that could conquer anyone, but preferred to befriend them instead. Standing at the observation deck, watching the human ship depart, HFY finally understood what he had witnessed. He hadn't seen humans charge into war. He had seen them end one before it could truly begin. 3 months after the incident at Station Omega-7, Ambassador HFY found himself aboard a Kethmori battle cruiser heading toward the edge of known space. The invitation from War Chief Thrakenael had been unexpected, but the reason for the journey was even more surprising. "You wish to understand the humans better," Thrakenael had explained during their private meeting on his homeworld. "As do I. But understanding cannot come from diplomatic reports or secondhand accounts. It must come from seeing them in their natural environment." Now, as their ship approached the coordinates Thrakenael had received from Admiral Chun herself, HFY wondered what they would find. The humans had agreed to the visit, but they had specified that it should come to a particular set of coordinates in what appeared to be empty space. The bridge of the Kethmori cruiser was a study in controlled aggression. Every surface was designed for efficiency and intimidation. The crew moved with military precision, their red-scaled forms imposing even when performing routine duties. Thrakenael stood at the center of it all, a mountain of muscle and bone who had commanded respect through strength for his entire life. "Sensors detecting artificial structures," announced the ship's science officer. "Configuration unknown. Energy signatures are unusual." Through the main viewing port, HFY saw what looked like a small asteroid field. But as they drew closer, he realized the asteroids were too regular in shape and too purposefully arranged to be natural. "Magnify," Thrakenael ordered. The image on the main screen resolved into something that made both visitors stare in confusion. The asteroids weren't asteroids at all. They were ships, hundreds of them, ranging from small fighter craft to vessels larger than the cruiser they were riding in. But they were attached to actual asteroids, camouflaged so perfectly that they appeared to be natural space debris. By the void, the Kethmori science officer breathed. "It's an entire fleet. How many ships are there?" Before anyone could answer, a familiar voice came through their communication system. "Kethmori vessel, this is Admiral Chun. Welcome to Firebase Echo. Please follow the navigation beacon to docking Base 7. A small probe detached from one of the nearby asteroid ships and began projecting a holographic pathway through the hidden fleet. As they followed it, HFY tried to count the vessels they passed. He gave up after reaching 300. The humans had built an entire military base inside an asteroid field and made it invisible to casual observation. "This is impressive," Thrakenael admitted grudgingly. "But why show us? Military installations are usually kept secret." As if she had heard his question, Admiral Chin's voice came through the communicator again. "Because you asked to understand us better, War Chief. And understanding requires trust. Besides, this isn't our most impressive installation. The docking bay they were directed to was carved into the heart of a massive asteroid. As their ship settled onto the landing platform, Zeftai could see that the interior of the space rock had been completely hollowed out and converted into a sophisticated military facility. The technology was unlike anything he had seen before, seamless integration between human engineering and natural rock formations. Admiral Chen met them at the airlock, accompanied by the same team Zeftai remembered from the diplomatic station. Dr. Martinez carried a tablet covered in scientific notations, while Sarah wore what was obviously military combat gear despite the peaceful nature of the visit. "Welcome to one of our frontier outposts," Admiral Chun said with her characteristic warm smile. "We're honored to host representatives of the Kethmori Empire and the Altarian Republic." Thrakenel looked around the docking bay with the critical eye of a military professional. "How many personnel are stationed here?" "Currently? About 15,000, Dr. Martinez answered cheerfully, though that number varies depending on operational requirements. Zeftai felt his breathing falter. 15,000 personnel in what had appeared to be empty space just hours ago. How many facilities like this do humans operate? Sarah's green eyes met his with that same calm directness he remembered. Enough. Admiral Chun led them through corridors that had been carved from solid rock, but fitted with technology that made the most advanced Altarian facilities seem primitive. They passed training areas where humans practiced combat techniques Zeftai had never seen, laboratories where scientists worked on projects that seemed to bend the laws of physics, and command centers that monitored space across dozens of star systems. "Your people seem very focused," Thrakenel observed as they watched a group of human soldiers running through what appeared to be a combat simulation. "We've learned the importance of being prepared," Admiral Chen replied. "Our history taught us that peace is precious, but it has to be protected." They paused at an observation deck that looked out into space. From here, they could see the true scope of the hidden fleet. Ships moved in and out of the asteroid field with practiced efficiency, their movements coordinated like a dance performed by hundreds of partners. "Admiral," Zeftai asked carefully, "may I ask how long it took to build this facility? This particular outpost?" "About 8 months, Dr. Martinez answered, checking his tablet, though we had help from the automated construction systems." 8 months. Thrakenel's voice carried disbelief. "It would take my people years to carve tunnels through this much rock, even with our best equipment." Sarah smiled for the first time since they had arrived. "You're thinking like engineers, not like humans. We didn't carve these tunnels." Before either visitor could ask what she meant, an alarm began sounding throughout the facility. It wasn't the urgent wail of an emergency alarm, but rather a steady, rhythmic tone that seemed to energize rather than alarm the human personnel. "What's happening?" Zeftai asked. Admiral Chun was already moving toward a wall-mounted communication panel. "Incoming priority transmission from the outer sensor grid. Probably another first contact situation." The communication panel activated, showing the face of a young human woman with lieutenant's insignia. "Admiral, we have a situation developing in the Kepler 442 system. Unknown vessels have entered the system and are approaching the inhabited worlds." "Kepler 442, Dr. Martinez said, consulting his tablet. "That's the Rillan system. Peaceful agricultural species. No military capabilities to speak of." Admiral Chen's expression became more serious. "How many unknown vessels, Lieutenant?" "Initial scan shows 47 ships, Admiral. Configuration suggests hegemony design, but the energy signatures are different. Stronger." Thrakenel stepped forward. "Admiral, if the hegemony has returned with a larger force." "It's not the hegemony," Sarah said quietly, studying a data pad she had pulled from her equipment belt. "Energy signatures are wrong. These are the Devourers." The temperature in the observation deck seemed to drop several degrees. Zeftai had heard whispers about the Devourers, a machine civilization from outside the galaxy that consumed entire worlds to fuel their expansion. Most species consider them a myth, stories told to frighten children. "The Devourers are real?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Very real," Admiral Chen confirmed. "They've been probing our galaxy's outer rim for about 6 months now. We've been tracking their movements and trying to establish contact." "Contact?" Thrakenel's laugh was harsh. "The stories say they consume everything in their path. What possible contact could there be?" Dr. Martinez looked up from his tablet. "Well, we've been trying to talk to them. So far they haven't been interested in conversation." Admiral Chun touched the communication panel again. "Lieutenant, What's the status of the Rillan population? Approximately 12 billion beings across 4 worlds, Admiral. Their government has been notified of the approaching fleet, and they're requesting immediate assistance. Time until the unknown fleet reaches the inhabited worlds. 18 hours at current velocity. Admiral Chun was quiet for a moment, and Zeftai could practically see her mind working through options and calculations. When she spoke again, her voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who had already made her decision. Alert all units. We're implementing Protocol Omega. Every human in the observation deck suddenly moved with increased urgency. Sarah was already heading toward what Zeftai assumed was the armory. Dr. Martinez was typing rapidly on his tablet, sending messages to various departments throughout the facility. Admiral, Thrakatel said carefully, "What is Protocol Omega?" Admiral Chen's smile was sharp and cold. "It's what we do when someone threatens innocent people, and diplomacy isn't an option." The next few hours were unlike anything either visitor had ever experienced. The hidden asteroid base transformed from a peaceful research facility into the nerve center of a military operation that spanned multiple star systems. Ships that had been camouflaged as space debris revealed themselves and began moving with purpose. Communication arrays that had been disguised as mining equipment began coordinating with human facilities across dozens of worlds. "How many ships do you have?" Zeftai asked as he watched the tactical display showing human vessels moving to intercept the Devourer fleet. "In this sector? About 2,000 combat-ready vessels," Dr. Martinez answered without looking up from his calculations. "But this isn't about ship numbers. It's about making sure the Rillans stay safe." 2,000 ships? Thrakanael stared at the display. "The entire Kethmori fleet consists of 800 vessels. Different philosophies," Admiral Chen explained. "You build ships to project power. We build them to protect people." As they watched, the tactical display updated to show the Devourer fleet's approach to the Rillan system. The machine ships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each vessel was enormous, larger than anything in the known galaxy, except for the legendary world ships of ancient civilizations. "Admiral," came a voice from the communication system. "This is Captain Rodriguez aboard the New Horizon. We have visual contact with the Devourer fleet. Requesting permission to begin engagement." "Negative, Captain," Admiral Chen replied immediately. "Protocol Omega specifies that we try communication one more time. Open a channel to the lead Devourer vessel." The main screen switched to show the bridge of the New Horizon, where a stern-faced human captain was staring at his own tactical displays. "Channel open, Admiral." Admiral Chen's voice carried clearly across space as she addressed the approaching machine fleet. "Devourer vessels, this is Admiral Chun of the Terran Federation. The worlds you are approaching are under our protection. We request that you change course and avoid unnecessary conflict." The response came quickly, transmitted in a mechanical voice that seemed to echo with the sound of grinding metal. "Humans, your species is known to us. You are classified as a minor threat. These worlds will be consumed. Your interference is irrelevant." "I see," Admiral Chen said calmly. "And if we refuse to allow that to happen, then you'll be consumed as well." Admiral Chen nodded, as if she had expected that exact response. "Captain Rodriguez, you are authorized to protect the Rillan worlds by any means necessary." What happened next redefined Zeftai's understanding of military capability. The human fleet moved like a single living organism. Ships that had seemed randomly positioned suddenly revealed themselves to be part of an intricate tactical formation that surrounded the Devourer fleet from multiple directions. Vessels that had appeared to be simple cargo haulers deployed weapon systems that outclassed anything the Kethmori possessed. But it wasn't the weapons that impressed Zeftai. It was the coordination. Every human ship knew exactly where every other human ship would be at every moment of the battle. They moved through space like dancers who had rehearsed their performance for years, each vessel's actions perfectly complementing those of their allies. When one ship moved to attack, 3 others were already in position to support it. When a vessel took damage, medical ships were there to receive evacuated personnel before the wounded ship had even finished transmitting its distress call. The Devourers, despite their technological advantages and massive size, found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. When they concentrated their firepower on one section of the human fleet, The humans simply flowed around the attack like water around stone. When they tried to break through the human formation to reach the Rillan worlds, they discovered that every route had been blocked by ships that had positioned themselves with perfect timing. How are they doing this? Thrakenel asked, his voice filled with something that might have been awe. No species coordinates this precisely. Not even the machine races achieve this level of tactical unity. Dr. Martinez looked up from his tablet with a grin. Practice. Lots and lots of practice. Plus, humans are really good at working together when the stakes are high enough. On the tactical display, the battle raged for 6 hours. The human fleet systematically disabled Devourer vessels with surgical precision, targeting engines and weapons systems while avoiding areas that might house important technology or information. When Devourer ships attempted to self-destruct rather than be captured, human vessels were ready with containment fields that minimized the explosions. By the time the engagement ended, 34 Devourer vessels had been captured intact, 12 had been destroyed, and one had managed to escape back toward the galaxy's edge. The human fleet had suffered damage to dozens of vessels, but had lost only 3 ships entirely. More importantly, the 12 billion Rillans had never been in any real danger. Admiral, Captain Rodriguez reported, all Devourer vessels have been secured. Preliminary scans suggest their technology is more advanced than previous encounters. Science teams are requesting permission to begin detailed analysis. Permission granted, Admiral Chen replied. Also, please extend our gratitude to the Rillan government for their patience during the engagement. Let them know that normal trade and communication can resume immediately. As the tactical display showed human ships beginning cleanup operations, Zeftai realized that what he had witnessed wasn't just a military victory. It was a demonstration of a completely different approach to galactic politics. Most species, including his own Altarians, viewed military action as a last resort to be used only when their own survival was threatened. The Kethmori used military force to expand their territory and influence. The Devourers used it to consume resources they needed for growth. The humans used military force to protect people they had never met, of a species they had barely interacted with, in a star system that had no strategic value to human interests. Admiral, he asked quietly, how many species would humanity protect this way? Admiral Chen's answer was immediate and matter-of-fact. All of them. Thrakenel stared at her. All of them? Even species that haven't allied with you? Even ones that have been hostile? Evil exists when good people do nothing, Sarah said, rejoining them after helping coordinate the post-battle operations. If someone is hurting innocent people and we have the power to stop it, then we have the responsibility to stop it. But the cost, Zeftai protested. The resources, the risk to your own people. Dr. Martinez shrugged. Peace isn't free. If you want to live in a galaxy where innocent people are safe, you have to be willing to make that safety happen. As their visit to Firebase Echo continued over the following days, both Zeftai and Thrakenel began to understand what made humans different from every other species they had encountered. The humans had built a military force capable of defeating any threat in the known galaxy. But instead of using that force to conquer territory or intimidate rivals, they used it to create peace. Instead of demanding tribute or submission from weaker species, they offered protection and friendship to anyone who wanted it. Most remarkably, they did all of this while maintaining the same cheerful, optimistic attitude that Zeftai had first encountered during the diplomatic session on Station Omega-7. On their final day at the base, Admiral Chun took them to what she called the Memorial Garden, a section of the asteroid that had been converted into a beautiful park-like environment. Trees and flowers from hundreds of worlds grew under artificial sunlight, creating a peaceful sanctuary in the heart of the military facility. Every species we've made contact with is represented here, she explained as they walked among plants that had never grown in the same soil before humans made it possible. It's our way of remembering what we're fighting to protect. At the center of the garden stood a simple stone monument covered with names. Thousands and thousands of names, carved in dozens of different languages and writing systems. Who are they? Thrakenel asked. Everyone who has died protecting others, Admiral Chen replied. Human and non-human. Military and civilian. Anyone who gave their life so that innocent people could live safely. Zeftai read some of the names, recognizing scripts from species across the galaxy. There were Altarian names, Kethmori names, and names from dozens of species he had never heard of. You honor the dead of other species? He asked. Courage deserves recognition regardless of what species shows it, Dr. Martinez explained. And sacrifice in the name of protecting others is the highest form of courage. As they prepared to leave Firebase Echo, Zeftai realized that his entire understanding of galactic politics had been transformed. He had spent 300 years believing that military strength and diplomatic influence were the measures of a civilization's importance. The humans had shown him that the real measure of a civilization might be what it was willing to do for people who could offer nothing in return. Admiral Chun, he said as they reached the docking bay where the Kethmori cruiser waited, I have one final question. Of course. When you first applied to join the Galactic Council, you said that humans could offer peace, trade, knowledge, and friendship to those who wanted it. But you never mentioned that you could offer protection to those who needed it. Admiral Chen's smile was sad and warm at the same time. We hoped we wouldn't need to. We hoped that a galaxy full of intelligent species would have figured out how to protect each other by now. And when you realized that wasn't the case, we adapted, Sarah said simply. That's what humans do. We figure out what needs to be done, and then we do it. As their ship departed from the hidden base, Zeftai watched through the viewing port as the asteroid field resumed its camouflage. Within minutes, it was invisible again, just another collection of space debris in an apparently empty region of space. But he knew now that this was just one of many human installations scattered throughout the galaxy. A network of hidden guardians keeping watch over species that didn't even know they were being protected. Thrakenale was unusually quiet during the return journey to Kethmori space. Finally, as they neared his homeworld, he spoke. Zeftai, I have been a warrior my entire life. I have conquered worlds and commanded fleets that could destroy star systems. But I have never seen anything like what we witnessed. The military coordination? Zeftai asked. No, Thrakenale said slowly. The absolute certainty. They never questioned whether they should help the Rillans. They never debated whether it was worth the risk or the cost. The moment they learned that innocent people were in danger, they acted. Zeftai nodded. He had noticed the same thing. There had been no political calculations, no strategic considerations beyond how to protect the threatened species most effectively. My people have spent centuries believing that strength meant the ability to conquer, Thrakenale continued. The humans have shown us that real strength might mean the ability to protect. When Zeftai returned to his own homeworld, he was met by the Altarian Council of Worlds. They wanted a complete report on his observations of human military capabilities and strategic intentions. He told them about the hidden fleets and the advanced technology. He described the military coordination and the tactical superiority. He explained the network of bases and the scope of human influence. But most importantly, he told them about the memorial garden and the names carved in stone. He explained that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their advanced technology or their tactical brilliance. It was their absolute refusal to let innocent people suffer when they had the power to prevent it. The council listened to his report with growing amazement and, Zeftai suspected, growing relief. So the humans are not a threat to peaceful species? Asked the council leader. No, Zeftai replied. They are a threat to anyone who threatens peaceful species. There's a very important difference. That night, as he sat in his garden on Altaria looking up at the stars, Zeftai thought about what he had learned. The galaxy was full of species that were stronger, more advanced, or more ancient than humanity. But humanity was the only species that had looked at the vast, dangerous universe and decided that their job was to make it safe for everyone else. For the first time in his 300 years of life, Ambassador Zeftai felt truly secure. Not because his own people were strong enough to defend themselves, but because somewhere out in the darkness between the stars, humans were standing guard. Ambassador Zeftai was deep in meditation when the emergency beacon interrupted his peaceful morning routine. The urgent blue light that filled his private chambers could mean only one thing. The Altarian Council required his immediate presence for a crisis situation. He had been enjoying 6 months of quiet diplomatic work since returning from Firebase Echo. The galaxy seemed more peaceful than it had been in decades. Trade routes flourished under human protection, and several species that had been locked in century-old conflicts had agreed to human-mediated peace talks. The Devourer incursions had stopped entirely after the battle over the Rillan worlds. But now, as Zeftai hurried through the corridors of the council complex, He could sense an urgency in the air that reminded him of darker times. The emergency session chamber was already filled when he arrived. Representatives from dozens of species sat in the circular arrangement that had been used for crisis meetings since the Altarian Republic was founded. But what struck him immediately was who wasn't present. There were no human representatives. Ambassador HFY called Council Leader Veltar from the center of the chamber. Please join us immediately. We have received disturbing news from multiple sectors. HFY took his place among the other ambassadors and activated his personal display to review the briefing materials. What he saw made his blood run cold. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Human bases had gone silent. Human patrols had stopped responding to communications. The vast network of protection that humanity had quietly established over the past year was simply gone. When did this begin? He asked. Approximately 72 hours ago, replied Ambassador Kethvar of the Nexus Collective. The first reports came from the Outer Rim sectors. Human installations simply stopped transmitting. No distress signals, no explanation. They just went dark. What about the human government? Have they provided any explanation? The chamber fell uncomfortably silent. Finally, Veltar spoke again. Ambassador, we have been unable to make contact with any human authority. Earth itself has stopped responding to all diplomatic communications. HFY felt the familiar chill of fear running down his spine. In his experience, when a spacefaring civilization suddenly went silent, it usually meant they had been destroyed or conquered. But the humans had military capabilities that exceeded anything in the known galaxy. What force could possibly threaten them? Could this be some kind of communication system failure? Suggested Ambassador Threx of the Vorthan Empire. Negative, came the mechanical voice of the Nexus Collective representative. Our analysis indicates the human facilities are still operational, but they're not responding to any external communications. This appears to be a deliberate isolation. HFY studied the star charts showing human territory. The area is marked in blue, representing confirmed human presence, covered nearly a third of the galaxy. If humanity had truly withdrawn from galactic affairs, the power vacuum would be catastrophic. Have there been any incidents since the humans went silent? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Ambassador Jethrak of the Kethmori delegation stepped forward. Despite the peace treaty signed after the hegemony incident, the Kethmori had maintained their aggressive military traditions. Recent intelligence suggested they had been building new fleets. The Kethmori Empire has detected several opportunities for territorial expansion in sectors previously under informal human protection, Jethrak announced. We have dispatched survey fleets to claim these regions. Opportunities? HFY's voice carried more emotion than was typical for diplomatic proceedings. You mean you're moving to conquer worlds that were under human protection? The humans have abandoned these regions, Jethrak replied defensively. We are merely filling the vacuum they left behind. Before HFY could respond, new alerts began appearing on the chamber's central display. Reports of military movement across multiple sectors. The hegemony remnants, apparently emboldened by humanity's silence, were launching new conquest campaigns. Several machine civilization probes had been detected moving toward previously protected worlds. Most alarming of all, long-range sensors had detected what appeared to be a massive Devourer fleet approaching from outside the galaxy. How large is the Devourer force? Veltar asked. The answer came from the Nexus Collective's advanced sensor networks. Preliminary estimates suggest over 5,000 vessels, each larger and more heavily armed than those encountered during the Rillan incident. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives realized the implications. The previous Devourer force of less than 50 ships had required the entire human military presence in that sector to defeat. A force of 5,000 would be unstoppable by any conventional defense. When will they reach inhabited systems? HFY asked. At current velocity, approximately 14 standard days. HFY closed his eyes and tried to think. 14 days until the largest invasion force in galactic history reached worlds full of innocent people. No human protection, no coordinated defense. Most species were already moving to exploit the power vacuum rather than preparing for mutual defense. We need to contact the humans, he said firmly. Whatever has caused their withdrawal, we need to convince them to respond to this threat. How? Asked Ambassador Kethvar. We have tried every communication method available. They simply do not respond. HFY was quiet for a moment, thinking about his time at Firebase Echo. Admiral Chun had said that understanding humans required seeing them in their natural environment. Perhaps contacting them required the same direct approach. "I need to go to human space personally," he announced. "Diplomatic immunity should allow me to approach their borders without being considered hostile." "That could be extremely dangerous," Veltar warned. "We don't know why the humans have withdrawn. They might consider any approach to be an act of aggression." "Then, I'll have to make sure they understand I come in peace," Zeftai replied. "But we can't just wait for the Devourer fleet to arrive. If there's any chance of convincing the humans to help, we have to try." The council agreed to his proposal, though with obvious reluctance. Zeftai was granted emergency diplomatic authority and assigned a fast courier ship for the journey to the nearest confirmed human base. The trip to Firebase Echo took 3 days, and with each hour that passed, the galaxy seemed to become more chaotic. Reports continued to flood in of various species moving to claim territory, resources, and strategic positions that had been stable under human protection. When Zeftai's ship finally reached the coordinates where Firebase Echo had been hidden, he found empty space. Not the camouflaged asteroid field he remembered, but genuinely empty space. The entire installation had vanished without a trace. "Begin scanning for any signs of human presence," he ordered his ship's science officer. "They have to be somewhere." For hours, they searched the system where Firebase Echo had operated. Finally, their sensors detected something unusual, a single small probe drifting in the outer system, nearly lost among the background radiation of space. When they retrieved the probe, they found it contained a simple message recorded by Admiral Chin herself. "To any diplomatic representatives seeking contact with the Terran Federation, humanity has entered a period of voluntary isolation while we address internal matters of critical importance. We regret any inconvenience this may cause to galactic affairs. Please respect our privacy during this difficult time." The message was polite, formal, and told them absolutely nothing about why the humans had withdrawn or whether they would respond to the approaching Devourer threat. But something in Admiral Chin's tone suggested to Zeftai that this wasn't a simple political decision. There was an undercurrent of sadness, almost regret, in her voice. "Plot a course for Earth," he told his pilot. "If we can't find answers out here, we need to go to the source." The journey to the Sol system took another 2 days, during which the reports from across the galaxy grew increasingly desperate. The Kethmori expansion fleets had encountered unexpected resistance from several species that had relied on human protection, leading to brutal conflicts. The hegemony remnants had successfully conquered 3 systems before encountering organized opposition. Most troubling of all, the Devourer fleet had accelerated its approach. New estimates put their arrival at 9 days rather than 14. When Zeftai's ship entered the Sol system, they found it transformed beyond recognition. Earth was surrounded by a defensive grid that made Firebase Echo look like a minor outpost. Massive orbital stations bristled with weapon systems that could destroy entire fleets. The space around the human homeworld was filled with ships of designs Zeftai had never seen, vessels that seemed to blend human technology with something else entirely. "Incoming transmission," announced his communications officer. The main screen activated to show a human officer Zeftai didn't recognize. The woman's uniform was different from the ones he had seen before, incorporating design elements that seemed almost organic. "Ambassador Zeftai," she said, somehow knowing his identity without any introduction. "I am Commander Harrison of the Terran Defense Grid. Admiral Chun has authorized me to escort you to a meeting location." "Thank you, Commander. I come seeking answers to questions that affect the entire galaxy." "Understand. Please follow our navigation beacon. And, Ambassador, do not be alarmed by what you see during your approach to Earth." As their ship moved deeper into the Sol system, Zeftai began to understand what Commander Harrison had meant. The changes to human space weren't just military. There were structures around Earth and Mars that defied easy description, massive installations that seemed to be part technology and part living organism. Ships moved between them with purpose, but many of the vessels appeared to be partially organic as well. "Commander," he called through the communication system, "what has happened here?" "First contact," Commander Harrison replied simply. "But not the kind we expected." They were directed to land on one of the orbital platforms around Earth. As Zeftai stepped off his ship, he immediately noticed that the air itself felt different. Richer, somehow, with an energy that made his skin tingle. Admiral Chun was waiting for him in what appeared to be a garden growing inside the space station. But the plants were unlike anything from any world he had ever seen. They seemed to shimmer with their own light, and some of them moved in ways that suggested intelligence. Ambassador, Admiral Chun greeted him with her familiar warm smile, though he could see stress lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. Thank you for coming. I know the galaxy has questions. Admiral, the entire galactic community is in chaos. The Devourer fleet is approaching. Conflicts are breaking out across multiple sectors, and humanity has completely withdrawn from galactic affairs. We need to understand what has happened. Admiral Chun gestured for him to sit on what appeared to be a living chair that shaped itself to accommodate his form. 3 weeks ago, we made contact with a species unlike anything we had ever encountered. They call themselves the Gardeners. As if responding to her words, something moved among the strange plants around them. Zeftai caught glimpses of forms that seemed to shift between plant and animal, solid matter, and energy. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The Gardeners have been traveling the universe for millions of years, Admiral Chun continued. They don't conquer worlds or consume resources. They cultivate life. They help species evolve beyond their original limitations. Evolution, Zeftai asked carefully. Physical evolution, mental evolution, spiritual evolution. They showed us possibilities for humanity that we never imagined. But the process requires complete isolation during the transformation period. One of the Gardener entities approached them, and Zeftai felt his mind filled with concepts that were almost too large to comprehend. Images of humanity spreading not just across the galaxy, but between galaxies. Visions of human consciousness expanded beyond individual bodies. Ideas that made his head spin with their implications. They're changing you, he whispered. They're helping us change ourselves, Admiral Chun corrected. But the process is delicate. Any external interference could disrupt it catastrophically. That's why we had to withdraw from galactic affairs. But the Devourer fleet, Zeftai protested. 5,000 ships approaching the inner systems. Without human protection, billions of innocent beings will die. Admiral Chin's expression became sad. We know. The Gardeners have shown us the approaching threat. But our transformation is only half complete. If we interrupt it now to deal with external threats, we lose this opportunity forever. And if you don't interrupt it, entire civilizations will be destroyed. Yes, she said quietly. That is the choice we face. Zeftai felt a cold understanding settle in his mind. The humans were being offered transcendence, the chance to become something greater than they had ever imagined. But accepting it meant abandoning their role as protectors of the galaxy. Admiral, in all our interactions, humanity has consistently chosen to protect others even at great cost to yourselves. How can you abandon that principle now? Admiral Chun was quiet for a long time, staring at the strange garden around them. Finally, she spoke again. Because, Ambassador, we have learned something that changes everything. The Gardeners have shown us the true scope of the universe. The galaxy is vast, but it is only one of countless galaxies. And there are threats out there that make the Devourers look like children playing with toys. She stood and walked to a section of the garden where the plants seemed to form patterns that hurt to look at directly. Humanity has been protecting this galaxy for the past year. But what we've really been doing is delaying the inevitable. The Devourers are not the greatest threat. They are merely the first wave of something much larger. What do you mean? The Gardeners call them the Reapers. They are a force that moves from galaxy to galaxy, consuming not just worlds or species, but entire realities. They harvest universes the way farmers harvest crops. And they're coming here. Zeftai felt his breathing become difficult. When, in approximately 50 years, the first Reaper Scouts will reach this galaxy. In 100 years, the full harvesting force will arrive. When that happens, everything we know will cease to exist. The implications were staggering. 50 years to prepare for a threat that could end reality itself. But if humanity evolves, Admiral Chun continued, if we accept the Gardeners' help in transcending our current limitations, we might be able to fight the Reapers. We might be able to protect not just this galaxy, but the universe itself, at the cost of letting the Devourers destroy civilizations now. Yes, Zeftai sat in silence, trying to process what he had learned. The humans faced an impossible choice: save billions of lives today, or save the entire universe in 50 years. There has to be another way, he said finally. Admiral Chin's smile was sadder than he had ever seen it. Ambassador, humanity has spent the past 3 weeks trying to find another way. Our best minds, enhanced by Gardner knowledge, have explored every possibility. There is no path that saves everyone. What about partial transformation? Could some humans evolve while others deal with the current crisis? The process requires our entire species. Individual transformation would fail. Zeftai stood and walked among the alien plants, his mind racing through possibilities. Everything he had learned about humanity suggested they would never willingly abandon innocent people to destruction. There had to be something he was missing. Admiral, he said slowly, when we first met, you told me that humans believe every problem has a solution. You said the impossible is just something that hasn't been figured out yet. I remember. So what solution haven't we figured out yet? Admiral Chin looked at him with an expression that was both hopeful and desperate. I don't know, Ambassador, but you're right that this goes against everything we believe about our responsibilities. One of the Gardner entities moved closer to them, and again Zeftai felt his mind filled with alien concepts. But this time, instead of overwhelming him, he tried to understand what they were communicating. Images of transformation, visions of evolution, but also something else, a sense of urgency that went beyond the approaching Devourer fleet. Admiral, he said suddenly, how long do you have to complete the transformation? The Gardners estimate another 3 weeks for the process to reach the point where interruption would be safe. And the Devourer fleet arrives in 9 days. Yes. Zeftai felt pieces of a solution beginning to form in his mind. What if the transformation isn't interrupted? What if it's accelerated? Admiral Chun stared at him. The Gardners have said that rushing the process could be catastrophic. But what if it's not rushed? What if it's enhanced? Zeftai turned to address the Gardner entity directly, hoping his thoughts would be understood. The response came as another flood of images and concepts, but these are different. Possibilities he hadn't considered. Risks that might be acceptable. They're saying something about shared transformation, Admiral Chin said, interpreting the Gardner communication. But I don't understand what they mean. Zeftai did. The solution was so elegant and so risky that it took his breath away. Admiral, what if humanity doesn't have to choose between saving the galaxy now and saving the universe later? What if there's a way to do both? How? By sharing the transformation. By evolving not just humanity, but every species that's willing to accept the change. The Gardner entity moved closer, and the intensity of its communication increased. Zeftai felt his mind expanded beyond its normal limits as alien knowledge flowed through him. It's possible, he said, his voice filled with awe. Difficult and dangerous, but possible. The Gardners could extend their transformation process to include multiple species simultaneously. Instead of humanity evolving alone over 3 weeks, dozens of species could evolve together over 9 days. The risks? Admiral Chin asked. Catastrophic failure would mean the destruction of everyone involved rather than just humanity. Success would mean a galactic civilization capable of fighting threats that no single species could handle. Admiral Chan was quiet for a moment, consulting with the Gardner entities through means Zeftai couldn't follow. Finally, she looked at him with an expression of determination he recognized. Ambassador, would the Galactic Council agree to such a proposal? Would species be willing to risk everything for the chance to become something greater? Zeftai thought about the chaos he had left behind. Species fighting over territory, the approaching Devourer fleet, the long-term threat of the Reapers that no one else knew about yet. Admiral, I think if you present the alternatives honestly, most species would prefer the risk of transformation to the certainty of destruction. Then, we have work to do, Admiral Chin said, her familiar confidence returning. And only 9 days to do it. As Zeftai prepared to return to his ship with the most important message in galactic history, he realized that once again, humanity had found a third option when everyone else saw only 2 choices. But this time, instead of charging into war to protect others, they were asking others to charge into evolution beside them. The universe was about to become a very different place. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been ongoing for 18 hours when Ambassador Zeftai, finally, received permission to address the assembly. In the time since his return from Earth, the galaxy had descended into complete chaos. The Devourer fleet was now less than 7 days away from the first inhabited systems. 3 different wars had broken out as species fought over territories previously protected by humanity. Most critically, several governments had accused the humans of betraying their protective responsibilities in favor of some kind of mysterious evolution cult. Distinguished representatives, HFY began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber filled with hundreds of delegates from across the galaxy. I bring a message from the Terran Federation that will require us to make the most important decision in galactic history. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives who had spent years respecting human protection now felt abandoned and betrayed. The Kethmori delegation was particularly vocal in their condemnation. The humans have abandoned us, War Chief Thrakanael declared, his massive form dominating the speaker's platform. They have hidden behind their barriers while the galaxy burns. What message could possibly justify such cowardice? HFY waited for the chamber to quiet before responding. War Chief, the humans haven't abandoned us. They have discovered a threat so great that it makes the approaching Devourer fleet seem like a minor inconvenience. That got everyone's attention. HFY activated the holographic display system and began showing the information the gardeners had shared with him. Images of other galaxies consumed and empty. Visualizations of reality-eating entities that moved between universes. Projections showing the arrival of something called the Reapers in 50 years. This is impossible, declared the representative from the Nexus Collective, their harmonic voice carrying disbelief. No force could threaten an entire universe. Tell that to the 17 galaxies that no longer exist, HFY replied, showing astronomical data that proved vast sections of the universe had simply vanished over the past few million years. The gardeners have been tracking this force across multiple realities. The Reapers are real, and they are coming. Ambassador Kethvar of the Vorthans leaned forward. Even if this threat exists, how does it justify humanity's withdrawal during our current crisis? HFY took a deep breath. This was the moment where everything would be decided. Because humanity has been offered a chance to evolve beyond our current limitations, to become something capable of fighting a universe-ending threat. But the transformation process requires complete isolation and cannot be interrupted without catastrophic consequences. So they save themselves while we die to the Devourers, snarled the hegemony representative. No, HFY said firmly. They have proposed something unprecedented. A shared transformation that would evolve multiple species simultaneously. We could all transcend our current forms and capabilities in time to face the Devourer fleet together. The chamber fell completely silent. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species stared at HFY as they processed what he had just suggested. Finally, Veltar spoke from the council leader's position. Ambassador, are you proposing that we voluntarily undergo some kind of alien-guided mutation of our entire species? I'm proposing that we voluntarily evolve beyond our current limitations with the help of beings who have been shepherding such transformations for millions of years. The risks are enormous, but so are the benefits. What kind of evolution? Asked the crystal beings of Nexus Prime, their chiming voices creating harmonics of curiosity and fear. HFY activated the holographic display again, showing what the gardeners had communicated to him. Images of expanded consciousness, enhanced physical capabilities, technology that merged with biology, and mental powers that bordered on the miraculous. Enhanced intelligence that would make our greatest scholars seem like children. Physical capabilities that would allow us to survive in any environment. Technological integration that would make our most advanced equipment seem primitive. And, most importantly, the ability to work together at a level that no current civilization has achieved. And if we refuse? War Chief Thrakanael asked. Then, the Devourers will reach the first inhabited worlds in 6 days. Without human protection, they will systematically consume every civilization in the galaxy. Even if we somehow manage to survive that, the Reapers will arrive in 50 years and destroy not just our civilizations, but reality itself. The debate that followed was unlike anything in the Council's history. Representatives argued passionately about the risks of transformation versus the certainty of destruction. Some species declared that they would rather die as they were than live as something else. Others embraced the possibility of transcendence with enthusiasm that bordered on fanaticism. Through it all, HFY found himself thinking about his observations of humanity over the past year. Every decision they had made, every risk they had taken, had been motivated by their desire to protect others. Now, they were offering to share the most precious gift they had ever received. The humans could complete their transformation safely if they simply ignored the rest of us, he pointed out during one particularly heated exchange. They're offering to risk everything they might become in order to include us in the process. Or they're trying to eliminate us by convincing us to destroy ourselves, countered the hegemony representative. Ambassador Kethvar stood up. The ancient Vorthans had been observing galactic politics for longer than any other species in the chamber. In my people's experience, the humans have never acted from malicious intent. Their record speaks for itself. If they propose shared evolution, it is because they believe it serves the greater good. The debate continued for hours until finally, Veltar called for a preliminary vote. Not a binding decision, but a sense of where each species stood on the proposal. The results were closer than Zeftai had hoped. 43 species voted to consider the transformation. 37 voted against it. 26 abstained. Insufficient consensus, Veltar announced. The proposal cannot proceed without broader support. Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the council chamber. Emergency displays activated, showing space around the station filled with massive ships that hadn't been there moments before. Unknown vessels decloaking around the station, announced the security chief. Configuration wait. These are human ships. The main display showed dozens of vessels unlike anything Zeftai had seen before. They retained recognizable human design elements, but they seemed to merge technology with living systems in ways that suggested the transformation process was already well underway. Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system, but it sounded different, richer, more complex, carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with something deep in Zeftai's mind. Galactic Council. This is Admiral Chen aboard the evolved vessel Transcendence. We have monitored your debate and understand your concerns. With your permission, we would like to demonstrate what shared evolution could accomplish. Before anyone could object, the human ships moved with coordination that exceeded anything Zeftai had seen before. They positioned themselves in formation around the council station with precision that suggested they were operating as parts of a single organism. Admiral Veltar said carefully, "What kind of demonstration do you propose?" "The kind that shows you what we could accomplish together." Sensors indicate a Devourer Advanced Scout approaching this system. Estimated time of arrival, 4 hours. Panic swept through the chamber. A single Devourer Scout was still larger and more powerful than most conventional warships. The council station had defensive systems, but they were designed to handle pirates and minor threats, not mechanical war machines from outside the galaxy. "Admiral," War Chief Thrakenel said, his voice carrying unusual respect, "my people's warships are 3 days away. We cannot mount an effective defense in 4 hours." "You won't need to," Admiral Chen replied. "The evolved human fleet will handle the Devourer Scout. But we invite representatives from each species to observe the engagement from our command vessel. You should see what evolution makes possible." Zeftai volunteered immediately, as did representatives from most of the major powers. Within an hour, they found themselves aboard the human ship Transcendence, and the experience was unlike anything they could have imagined. The ship's interior seemed to be alive. Surfaces responded to touch, corridors adjusted their configuration based on need, and the very air hummed with energy that made everyone feel more alert and capable than they had ever been. But it was the crew that truly demonstrated the transformation. The humans aboard the ship moved with perfect coordination, but they retained their individual personalities and the warmth that Zeftai remembered from his first encounters with them. Dr. Martinez, now somehow taller and bearing golden lines that traced patterns across his skin, greeted the visiting delegates with his characteristic enthusiasm. "Welcome aboard. I know this all looks strange, but we're still us. Just more so." Sarah, whose green eyes now literally glowed with inner light, led them to the command center. "The gardeners didn't change who we are. They helped us become more of who we always were." The command center was a sphere where the crew worked in 3 dimensions, their enhanced capabilities allowing them to process information at speeds that made conventional computer systems seem sluggish. But, more importantly, they worked together with a harmony that reminded Zeftai of music. "Devourer Scout detected," announced someone whose voice seemed to come from multiple crew members simultaneously. Configuration analysis complete. Engaging. Through the transparent walls of the command center, the delegates could watch as the human fleet engaged the Devourer scout. What they saw redefined their understanding of what was possible. The human ships moved like they were performing a choreographed dance, each vessel's actions perfectly complementing those of every other ship in the fleet. But, more than that, they seemed to anticipate the Devourer vessel's responses before they happened. When a mechanical scout fired its primary weapon, a beam that could cut through planetary crust, the human ships flowed around it like water flowing around a stone. When it launched seeker drones designed to overwhelm enemy defenses, the humans somehow turned the drones against their own mother ship. The engagement lasted exactly 7 minutes. When it ended, the Devourer scout was floating helplessly in space, its systems disabled but its structure intact. Incredible, bêtait ambassadeur Ketvar. Your coordination exceeds anything I have ever witnessed. Admiral Chun, whose presence seemed to fill the command center despite her unchanged physical size, smiled. This is what becomes possible when barriers between minds become permeable. We remain individuals, but we can share thoughts and coordinate actions at the speed of consciousness itself. And this is what you're offering to share with us, asked the Nexus Collective representative. This is the beginning of what we're offering, Dr. Martinez corrected. The enhanced coordination, the expanded consciousness, the technological integration. These are just the foundation. The gardeners have shown us possibilities that our current language cannot adequately describe. Sarah gestured toward the disabled Devourer scout. We captured that vessel intact so we can study its technology and learn about the greater threat it represents. In our current form, reverse engineering Devourer technology would take decades. In our evolved state, we should have a complete understanding within days. But at what cost? Demanded a delegate from species HFY didn't recognize. What do you sacrifice to gain these abilities? The question silenced the command center briefly. Then, Admiral Chin spoke, and her voice carried a sadness that hadn't been there before. Fear, she said simply. We sacrifice fear, not caution or wisdom, but the kind of fear that keeps people from taking necessary risks or making difficult choices. We sacrifice the isolation that makes cooperation difficult. We sacrifice the limitations that keep us from reaching our full potential. And in return, we gain the ability to protect not just our own species, but every form of life in the universe. We gain the power to stand against forces that no individual civilization could survive. We gain a future that includes everyone rather than just the strongest. HFY found himself studying the evolved humans around him. They were recognizably the same people he had met months ago, but they carried themselves with confidence that came from expanded capabilities. More importantly, they radiated the same protective instinct that had characterized humanity from their first appearance on the galactic stage. The transformation process, he asked, how does it actually work? The Gardeners guide each species through changes that enhance their natural strengths while eliminating weaknesses that limit cooperation, Dr. Martinez explained. For humans, that meant expanding our ability to work together while maintaining our innovation and adaptability. For other species, the changes would be different, but complementary. The Kethmori, for example, Sarah added, glancing at War Chief Threkanale's representative, would retain their warrior strength, but gain the ability to channel that strength toward protection rather than conquest. The Altarians would keep their diplomatic skills while gaining the physical capabilities to act on their peaceful intentions. And species that refuse the transformation, asked the hegemony delegate, will be protected by those who accept it, Admiral Chun said immediately. This isn't about forced evolution. It's about creating a galactic civilization strong enough to defend everyone, regardless of their individual choices. The return journey to the council station was conducted in thoughtful silence as each delegate processed what they had witnessed. HFY found himself thinking about the implications of what the humans were offering. They were proposing to share power rather than hoarding it. They were asking other species to join them in accepting risks rather than asking others to take risks on their behalf. Most remarkably, they were willing to extend their own transformation timeline to include others, despite the increased dangers that would bring. When the council reconvened, the debate was different. Instead of arguing about whether the transformation was possible or safe, representatives began discussing the practical details of implementation. How many species would need to participate for the process to succeed? Asked Veltar. The gardeners estimate that evolution of 50 or more species simultaneously would create sufficient collective capability to face the immediate devourer threat. Admiral Chen replied through the communication system. Fewer species means increased risk. More species means increased capability. And the timeline? 6 days from initiation to completion. We would finish the process with approximately 12 hours before the devourer fleet reaches the first inhabited systems. War Chief Thrakanael's massive form dominated the speaker's platform as he addressed the chamber. Ambassador Chun, if we agree to this transformation, what guarantee do we have that humanity will not use their enhanced capabilities to dominate other species? The answer came not just from Admiral Chun, but from multiple human voices speaking in harmony, because domination is the antithesis of evolution. Growth comes from cooperation, not control. We are offering to share power, because power shared is power multiplied. The final vote was closer than Zeftai had hoped, but sufficient to proceed. 67 species agreed to participate in the shared transformation. 39 chose to remain in their current form, but agreed to accept protection from the evolved civilizations. 6 species, including the hegemony remnants, rejected both options and departed the council station immediately. Implementation begins in 6 hours, Admiral Chen announced. All participating species should prepare for changes that will affect every aspect of their civilization. The gardeners will guide the process, but the final results will depend on how completely each species embraces the transformation. As the council session ended and representatives began making frantic preparations to return to their homeworlds, Zeftai realized that they had just made a decision that would reshape the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. In 6 days, 67 species would either transcend their individual limitations to become something unprecedented in universal history, or they would destroy themselves in the attempt. But as he watched the human ships moving around the council station with their impossible coordination, Zeftai felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood, genuine hope for the future. For the first time in his 300 years of life, he was about to become part of something greater than himself. The evolution was about to begin. Ambassador Zeftai had experienced many transformations in his 300 years of life, but nothing had prepared him for the evolution itself. The process began simultaneously across 67 homeworlds, coordinated by the gardeners with precision that defied comprehension. On Altaria, Zeftai stood with billions of his people in massive assembly areas that had been prepared according to specifications provided by the evolved humans. The gardener entities manifested as combinations of light and living matter that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their presence filled the mind with concepts too large for conventional thought, while somehow remaining completely non-threatening. "Do not fear the changes," came their collective voice, somehow speaking directly to every conscious being on the planet. "You are becoming more of who you already are." The transformation felt like awakening from a dream Zeftai hadn't realized he was having. His consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of his individual mind while remaining distinctly his own. He could sense the thoughts and emotions of every other Altarian undergoing the process, but instead of overwhelming him, it felt like joining a symphony where every voice contributed to a greater harmony. His physical form changed more subtly than he had expected. The blue skin that marked his people deepened to a shade that seemed to hold starlight. His height increased slightly, and he felt strength flowing through muscles that had never been particularly impressive. But the most significant change was in his perception. He could see connections between things that had never been apparent before. Patterns in space and time that revealed the underlying structure of reality. Most importantly, he could sense the presence of other evolved beings across the galaxy, a network of consciousness that spanned multiple worlds and species. As the 6-day transformation period progressed, Zeftai experienced what it meant to be part of something larger than any individual species. The Kethmori, their warrior instincts enhanced and refined, became protectors whose strength served all rather than just their own empire. The Vorthans, their ancient wisdom amplified, became guides who could see patterns across cosmic timescales. Each species retained their distinctive characteristics while gaining capabilities that complemented those of others. The crystal beings of Nexus Prime became living computers that could process information at quantum speeds. The gas dwellers of the Vorthan Empire became masters of energy manipulation. Even the peaceful agricultural species contributed abilities that proved essential to the collective whole. But it was the humans who served as the binding element that made cooperation possible. Their enhanced adaptability and coordination abilities created the framework that allowed dozens of vastly different species to work together as a unified force. On the final day of the transformation, as Zeftai felt the last changes settling into his enhanced form, Admiral Chen's voice reached every evolved being simultaneously. The Devourer fleet has reached the outer sensor perimeter. 5,000 ships, just as predicted. They will arrive at the first inhabited worlds in 8 hours. It's time to see what we have become. The mobilization that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Ships from 67 species moved toward the approaching threat with coordination that made conventional fleet movements seem chaotic. But these weren't the same vessels that had existed a week earlier. The transformation had affected technology as well as biology. Human ships had merged with Gardner biotech to become vessels that responded to thought rather than control systems. Kethmori warships had evolved into perfect expressions of protective strength. Altarian diplomatic vessels had become platforms for coordination and communication that could link minds across interstellar distances. Zeftai found himself aboard the flagship Transcendent Unity, a vessel that somehow incorporated design elements from every species in the Alliance while remaining recognizably human in its core philosophy. The command center was a sphere where representatives from multiple species worked together with seamless efficiency. Devourer fleet configuration analysis complete, announced a collective voice that included harmonics from dozens of species. 5,000 ships, each larger than our previous encounters. New weapon systems detected. They appear to have adapted based on their earlier defeats. Expected, Admiral Chen replied, her enhanced form radiating calm confidence. They learned from each encounter. But so do we. Through the transparent walls of the command center, Zeftai could see space filled with allied vessels. Not just hundreds or thousands, but tens of thousands of ships representing the combined military might of 67 evolved civilizations. Fleet Composition Report requested War Chief Thrakenel, whose evolved form had gained the ability to coordinate military operations across scales that his original mind couldn't have comprehended. 43,000 combat vessels, 12,000 support ships, and 6,000 specialized units came the immediate response. All crews are evolved personnel operating at enhanced capability levels. The numbers were impressive, but Zeftai understood that this engagement would be decided by more than ship counts. The Devourers had adapted their technology based on previous encounters. The question was whether the evolution had made the Allied forces adaptable enough to counter whatever new capabilities the machine civilization had developed. Contact in 4 hours, announced the Navigation Collective. Devourer fleet is maintaining formation and shows no signs of attempting communication. They never do, Dr. Martinez observed, his enhanced form allowing him to process tactical data at speeds that made computers seem sluggish. The Devourers don't negotiate or retreat. They simply consume. Then, we'll give them something they can't digest, Sarah said, her evolved abilities now encompassing combat coordination across multiple dimensions of space and time. As the two fleets approached each other, Zeftai experienced something that redefined his understanding of space combat. The Allied forces didn't simply arrange themselves in defensive formations. They created patterns in space that seemed to bend reality itself. Ships positioned themselves according to principles that incorporated evolved understanding of cosmic geometry. Weapon systems that had been enhanced by Gardner knowledge created effects that went beyond simple energy discharges. Most remarkably, the entire fleet began to move as a single organism that could respond to threats faster than individual ship captains could think. The Devourer fleet opened fire at maximum range, sending energy beams across millions of kilometers of space. The weapons were more powerful than anything previously encountered, capable of destroying entire planets with single volleys. The Allied response was to make the weapons irrelevant. Instead of absorbing or deflecting the energy, the evolved fleet somehow redirected it through dimensions that Zeftai's enhanced consciousness could barely comprehend. The planet-killing beams emerged elsewhere in space, directed away from any inhabited systems. Impossible, transmitted one of the Devourer vessels on open frequencies. Energy cannot be redirected through non-existent space. Space that doesn't exist in your understanding of reality, Admiral Chun replied calmly. But reality has more dimensions than most civilizations discover. The engagement that followed lasted 18 hours and redefined the concept of space warfare. The Devourers, for all their technological advancement, were limited by their mechanical understanding of a universe. They could process information quickly and adapt their tactics efficiently, but they couldn't transcend the fundamental limitations of their original programming. The Evolved Alliance, in contrast, combined the accumulated wisdom of 67 species with capabilities that exceeded the sum of their individual parts. When the Devourers adapted to one tactical approach, the Alliance immediately shifted to strategies that no single species could have conceived. The turning point came when Dr. Martinez, working in conjunction with crystalline computing entities and Vorthan energy manipulators, discovered that Devourer technology was vulnerable to a specific type of coordinated quantum resonance that could only be generated by multiple species working in perfect harmony. We can disable their ships without destroying them, he announced through the collective communication network. But it requires precise coordination from at least 12 different types of enhanced abilities. What followed was the most complex military operation in galactic history. Thousands of ships from dozens of species positioned themselves in patterns that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Each vessel contributed specific capabilities at precisely calculated moments, creating a resonance effect that propagated through the entire Devourer fleet. One by one, the massive machine ships went dark. Not destroyed, but completely deactivated. Their power sources remained functional, their structures intact, but their controlling intelligences simply ceased to function. Within 6 hours, the entire Devourer fleet of 5,000 ships floated helplessly in space, ready for study and analysis. Total victory with 0 casualties, War Chief Thrakenel reported, his voice carrying amazement despite his enhanced capabilities. In the entire history of warfare, such an outcome has never been achieved. Because warfare has never been conducted by 67 species working with perfect coordination, Admiral Chin replied. This isn't conquest. It's problem-solving on a galactic scale. As the Alliance fleet began the process of securing the disabled Devourer vessels, Zeftai found himself thinking about what they had accomplished. Not just the military victory, but the fundamental change in how galactic civilization operated. Species that had spent millennia competing for resources and territory now worked together with coordination that exceeded anything they could have achieved individually. The transformation had eliminated the fear and mistrust that had historically driven conflicts while enhancing the capabilities that made cooperation beneficial. Admiral, he asked during the post-battle analysis, what happens next? We've defeated the immediate threat, but the Reapers are still coming. Admiral Chen's enhanced form radiated confidence that seemed to affect everyone in the command center. Next, we prepare. We have 50 years to understand Devourer technology, develop new capabilities, and create defenses that can protect reality itself. Do you believe it's possible? Ambassador, 6 months ago, 67 species working in perfect coordination was impossible. Today, it's the new reality. 50 years from now, defeating entities that consume universes might be just another problem we've learned to solve. Dr. Martinez activated a holographic display showing the captured Devourer fleet. Analysis of their technology is already revealing connections to the larger threat. These ships contain navigation data that shows the Reaper's route of approach. More importantly, they contain technology that might be adaptable for universe-scale defense systems. How long until we understand their systems completely? Asked the Nexus Collective representative. With our enhanced analytical capabilities and quantum processing systems, approximately 18 months, came the reply from multiple scientists working in concert. Sarah approached the display, her evolved abilities allowing her to perceive patterns in the Devourer technology that were invisible to conventional analysis. There's something else. The navigation data doesn't just show the Reaper's approach route. It shows their weaknesses. Weaknesses? Zeftai asked. They've consumed 17 galaxies, but they've also left traces of their passage that reveal their operational limitations. They're incredibly powerful, but they're not omnipotent. Given enough time and preparation, they can be defeated. Or better yet, Admiral Chun added with a smile that reminded Zeftai of her pre-evolution warmth. They can be convinced to change their approach entirely. You want to negotiate with entities that consume universes? I want to understand why they consume universes. Every destructive behavior has underlying motivations. If we can address those motivations, we might be able to find solutions that benefit everyone involved. Over the following months, as the Evolved Alliance established new systems of galactic governance and began analyzing Devourer technology, Zeftai came to understand what Admiral Chen meant. The transformation hadn't just enhanced their capabilities, it had enhanced their perspective on what problems were worth solving and how to approach them. The Reapers weren't just a threat to be defeated. They were a challenge to be understood and overcome through cooperation, innovation, and the kind of determined optimism that had always characterized humanity. 1 year after the transformation, Zeftai stood in what had once been the Galactic Council chamber. The room had been expanded to accommodate representatives from hundreds of species, including some that had originally rejected evolution, but had subsequently requested inclusion in the process. The galaxy was peaceful in ways that had never before been possible. Trade flowed freely between systems that enhanced each other's capabilities rather than competing for limited resources. Conflicts that arose were resolved through enhanced diplomatic processes that addressed underlying causes rather than just surface disagreements. Most importantly, the species that had chosen to remain in their original forms were not just protected, but actively supported by the evolved civilizations. The transformation had created protectors rather than conquerors. Ambassador, Admiral Chen asked during a break in the proceedings, do you ever regret the choice to evolve? Zeftai considered the question carefully. His enhanced consciousness could perceive beauty in the universe that his original form would never have appreciated. His expanded capabilities allowed him to contribute to solutions that his previous limitations would have made impossible. His connection to the collective network of evolved consciousness provided a sense of belonging that transcended anything he had experienced as an individual. But, most importantly, he was part of a civilization that had chosen to become better rather than just stronger. No regrets, he replied. But I do have curiosity about what will become next. Admiral Chen's smile carried the same warmth and determination that had characterized humanity from their first appearance on the galactic stage. That depends on what challenges the universe presents. But whatever they are, we'll face them together. As Zeftai looked around the chamber filled with representatives from dozens of evolved species, he realized that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy hadn't been their military protection or their advanced technology. It had been their absolute refusal to accept that problems couldn't be solved, that cooperation was impossible, or that the future had to be a repetition of the past. They had charged into evolution the same way they had charged into every other challenge, with determination to protect others and the unshakable belief that impossible was just another word for something that hadn't been figured out yet. The universe was vast and full of threats that could destroy entire realities. But it was also full of species that had learned to work together with capabilities that exceeded anything they could achieve alone. 50 years to prepare for the Reapers seemed like plenty of time. After all, they were humans and their friends. The impossible was what they did best. When the next great challenge arrived at the edge of the galaxy, it would discover that reality itself had evolved beyond anything it had previously encountered. And leading that evolution would be the species that had taught the universe that the best way to survive impossible odds was to make sure everyone survived together. The universe had learned to dread humanity not because they were conquered by them, but because humanity had taught everyone else how to be unconquerable.